Well, hello everyone. It's Jordan Pickleball again. And first off, before I get into this review, I'd just like to say thank you for all the feedback that I got from the Vatic Prism Flash 14mm review. I didn't expect much from that video. I liked the paddle. I saw there wasn't much content about it, and so I just wanted to do something about that. So thank you for everyone who used my code. Thank you for everyone who watched the video, who gave critique, gave their thoughts, and gave some recommendations for paddles that they were really liking right now. So I just can't thank you enough. That was just an amazing response that I never expected. I know from those comments, there was a couple people asking me about whether I had changed my lead setup, and I have changed it. So I'm going to go over that briefly before getting into the review, but we'll stay on track here. I added 2 strips of pre-cut lead to either side, adding 0.2 to each side. This is based on the placement given by the Pickleball Effects video. So I'm really liking this. And other people have asked, have my thoughts changed at all the more I use the paddle? And honestly, I like the paddle more and more, especially with the lead. So I'm really enjoying this one. Again, if you want to use my code for this paddle, it's just Jordan Irwin, all capitals. So go ahead and use that if you're interested in that. That being said, we're getting into a review that I'm very excited about. It's a review of the new Engage MX 6.0 Pro paddle. It's one that I wasn't as excited about in the past because I had the previous paddle, and to be honest, there was just a little bit of disappointment with that paddle. I have it with me here, and I just really want to quickly go over the things I didn't love about this paddle, which I don't necessarily feel the same about the new one. So first off, I don't know if you can see this, but the grit it's almost like a spray-on texture. I know they had used words of carbon fiber. I think it says on here R210 carbon fiber, but when you actually receive the paddle, it's definitely like this, some sort of spray-on grit, maybe on top of a carbon fiber. For those who may know more, go ahead and comment. So that was a little bit disappointing. I felt like my spin was inconsistent. I felt like it was powerful, but I wasn't able to control it. And also there was other build quality issues. I didn't love the butt cap on this with the poke on there. It felt a little cheap. I also didn't love that. I mean, I have an overgrip on here, but there was exposed polymer in the handle, and if you grip it hard, you can definitely feel that. So there was a few things that I felt that this paddle would have been okay with at a lower price point, but at the price point of, I want to say it was $269, I just couldn't justify it. And so I was struggling to find something that justified that cost. Granted, it is an American-made paddle and has that warranty, which is, you know, amazing in and of itself, but I still couldn't quite justify this paddle. That being said, when I got the new paddle, although being skeptical, I was very excited for a number of reasons. And so we're going to go over quickly, before we even get into my thoughts on how the paddle plays, just the changes that I think were made for the better for this paddle. The first one right off the bat, I think, is looks. This is a very subdued look, which might be fine, but I think at this price point, it's nice to make your paddle kind of stand out. And I think this, they call it Arctic Gold, this kind of bronze and white color way they went with is really nice. Also, you can see this is not a spray-on texture, but rather it actually is a carbon fiber surface. Now, one thing I do need to mention, and I don't know if this really changes anything else about the review, so I'm going to mention it right away, is this is not a thermoform paddle. There is a more of a typical sandwich, you know, where you have a surface, core, surface going on here. That being said, I don't feel it plays like most of the sandwich paddles that I played with before. So I don't really think that changes too much about the build itself. I don't think it really affected how I played. And I mean, other than me mentioning it right here, it's not something I even thought about out on the court. So going back to looks, I personally like that. So I would call that an improvement. One thing I don't love is they use shiny edge guard on this paddle. I noticed on some of their lower end paddles that I own that they use matte. So I wonder if that was a choice they made. And if that's the case, good for them, for the people who like it. For me, that's not my favorite. Another thing to mention is, even though it is not thermoform, they did add something to stop you from touching that exposed polymer in the handle. It's not perfect. It's not as good as some of the thermoform paddles I've used, but it's definitely not a distraction. And I feel like if I was to add an edge guard, it would get even better as well. So the quality of this paddle just feels a lot better overall. Again, it's an American-made paddle, which I think is something that you can't really overstate the value of, and it comes with a great lifetime warranty. So I think those are all the things that I really have liked that the last year's paddle didn't have. Now, going beyond the look of the paddle, we're going to go into the actual playability of the paddle. One more thing I do want to mention, and I don't know if this comes with all units, but my unit came with a cover, which I did not receive on my last paddle. Granted, the cover is kind of swimming. It's a little bigger than the paddle on this edge here, so I don't know if it's made for a different paddle. I also know it has an older logo, which they sometimes use, so I'm wondering if it might have been originally for a different paddle. That being said, it's nice to have the cover, especially at this price point, which is a little bit lower at $260 before code. If you do want to use a code, I have one. The code is 2020 Irwin, IRWIN, all caps. So I will leave that in the comments as well. But going on to what I thought about the paddle's performance. As far as power goes, this is something that I felt was maybe an improvement from some of the other paddles I've used that were sandwich paddles. And it's an improvement from some of the other paddles I've been using in general right now. So I would give it between an 8 and a 9. I felt like my top power was maybe limited a little bit, but the overall feeling of power is throughout. I feel that when you're driving your third shot, your initial drive, it just feels natural. It feels good. I didn't have really many complaints with power at all. I did feel that if I swang super hard, I didn't necessarily get extra power, so that's why you're not seeing a 10 on there. I know some people rate this a lot lower, and even going back to my Vatic Prism review, I noticed I rated that paddle a lot higher than some other people, so it could be form for me versus some other people, but for me, I felt that this paddle had a lot of power, and I've used the Legacy before, I've used the Double Black Diamond, and I've used the Vatic Pro and Prism Flash before, so I've used a lot of power-ish paddles, and I felt like this one ranked very high among those, maybe slightly below or similar to the Legacy, in my opinion. One thing that it did very well was pop, especially at the line. I felt like the pop of this paddle was very good. Sometimes it was a little high and a little hard to control, but after a couple play sessions, I fit right in. I didn't feel like this became a deterrent from me wanting to use the paddle at all, but it's something to mention. And one thing I do want to mention is the difference between power and pop. For power, I'm usually talking about my ground strokes, my drives from the line, anything far away, anything fast, whereas pop is how fast it reacts to the ball, usually in the line or in that kind of situation. So both of those I'd rank somewhere between an 8 and a 9 because I didn't feel like they were ridiculously out of control or the most that I'd ever felt, when I was doing perfect flicks, but they were consistently high, and I would even say consistently higher than a majority of the paddles that I've used before. As far as control goes, as I mentioned again, I'd give this probably a 7. That could be higher depending on your play style. Again, I'm not that good. I'm somewhere between 3.3 to 3.7 probably. I don't want to use that 3.5 mantra because I feel like that's already claimed by Pickleball Studio. But at a lower level, I was having a little bit of trouble just controlling it because of the pop. That being said, adjusting my shots was not difficult. Adjusting to the play style of how this paddle runs isn't difficult at all. And I could be struggling just because of the amount of times that I personally switch paddles. So that could be a self-inflicted wound in some ways. But that being said, I played about 2 weeks with this paddle, different play sessions, and I did not struggle all that much at all with control. I thought it was fine. I thought it was a little bit different, but it wasn't something that was a deterrent at all for me wanting to pick up this paddle versus some of the other paddles that I have. There is one thing that I do want to mention, and this is something that you probably in the comments could have a solution for, so if you do, please mention it, but I did feel that the head weight was a little high on this paddle. This is coming from me, though, who, if you've watched the channel, I prefer the hybrid shape most times, and so I did feel that that head weight made it a little bit slower at the line. I have seen some paddle reviewers put lead tape in the handle itself just to kind of counterbalance that weight, so that might be something that I consider, but I just want people to mention that, or I just wanted to mention that for people to know that the head weight is a little higher than, say, a Double Black Diamond or the Vatic Pro. It's something to consider, but that being said, it's not super heavy and it didn't feel awkward. I wouldn't say it was as bad as like the CFS 16 or anything like that, but it was noticeable when I was up at the line that I was having to lift it just a little higher and be a little more intentional about that. That being said, I think those are a majority of the thoughts I have about the paddle. I think the looks are much improved. I feel the build quality is much improved. For specific weight, I'm running at 8.15 ounces for this paddle, just so everyone knows. But anyways, looks are improved. I feel like the build is improved. I feel that it is a really good blend of power, pop, and control. I definitely think that it is leaning towards power, as most of these Engage paddles do. I feel that it plays similar to some of the Engage paddles I have used in the past, with the exception of last year's paddle, which I really wasn't a fan of at all. And I also feel that it had a great sweet spot. That's one thing I forgot to mention earlier, but the sweet spot felt generous. It wasn't necessarily the biggest I'd ever felt, but it didn't feel lacking in any way whatsoever. I felt like as long as a majority of my hits were where they should be, I wasn't mishitting. I wasn't struggling with that at all. So that being said, do I recommend this paddle? Because I know it's a much higher price than some of the other paddles that you can get on the market. I know that even the Vatic Prism that we just looked at was $90. So it's a hard recommendation just because of that price point. But that being said, I think it is a paddle I do recommend. I think that you're getting some things that if you value is worth the money. And I mentioned if you value, it's worth the money. Because there are definitely paddles that I like as much. I'm not going to say more because I really like this paddle. I've been playing with this and the Double Black Diamond a majority of my playthroughs lately. And so there's paddles I like as much as this paddle in some ways at lower price points, but this paddle is $260, so it's high. It's not thermoform, so it's not the newest technology, but it is made in America, which I think is a big deal for a lot of people. I think it gives you just that support of the market. It gives you that that engagement with what's going on, and it also has that great warranty. So I think those are some things that you can't get from other paddle companies. I think most paddle companies have been doing a 90-day, a 3-month, or a 6-month warranty, and this is better than all of those. So I think if this is a paddle you really like and one that you're wanting to play with for a long time, I really couldn't say that you shouldn't upgrade to it, because you will have that warranty. You will have that assurance that it's going to be made in America. It's going to get back to you, you would hope quickly if anything was to go wrong. And you have that assurance that you can replace and repair this easily. So because of that, I don't really think it's overpriced. You also get at 20% off using my code. And they also regularly, this is kind of the Engage cheat sheet. So, maybe don't tell everyone about this. If you want to get one quickly, but they regularly have cosmetic sales. And I think even right now, the newest paddle is on this cosmetic sale. So you can get it for even cheaper. I think the cosmetic version of this paddle goes for about $199. And so that stacked with a code, you're looking at the same price as a lot of these other paddles and still getting all those great benefits. So I do recommend this paddle. I would say it's one of my top 3 paddles right now. Granted, I don't have as many paddles as other people, but I really, really like this paddle. I'd put it even ahead of the Prism Flash, probably below the Vatic Pro Flash, and then tied right now, really, with the Double Black Diamond in this paddle. And really, it comes down to me trying to change my preference from hybrid to an elongated shape. So that being said, I'm very excited about this paddle. I think Engage did everything they could have to make this paddle better than last year's, and I'm really, really excited. That being said, I'm so glad for whoever chooses to watch this video. I know it's much longer than I intended it to be. I was hoping for like 8 to 10 minutes, and I'm looking and I see that we're over 14 minutes now, but thank you for engaging in this video. Be sure to subscribe if you're interested in future paddle reviews. I have 2 right now that I can tell you I'm going to be working on, and it's different versions of this paddle, because I'm getting the square version of this paddle in 16mm, and I'm also getting the 14mm version of that EX paddle. So we're going to see the comparison between those two. I'm excited because I haven't reviewed a square paddle in a long time, and I haven't even played with a square paddle in a long time. So I'm very, very excited for those two, and they will be out shortly. I'll compare them to other paddles I've used in the past, as well as comparing them directly to this paddle that we just reviewed. So that being said, this is Jordan Pickleball. We're excited to continue reviewing paddles. We're thankful for you as a community giving me so many suggestions to making these videos better. And once again, if you want to use my code for this paddle, it's 2020 Irwin, no spaces, IRWIN, all caps. So go ahead and use that, and we're excited to continue reviewing paddles. You guys have fun, play safe, have a good time.